Lady Cecily will replace you as patroness, the Duke of Wycliffe declared before the school's assembled benefactors. My wife's dishonesty has endangered every child under this roof. He placed a leather-bound account book upon the lectern. Eleanor stared at the volume as if it were a weapon. She had never seen it before, yet her name appeared across its cover in faded gold. "Allow me to examine it," she said. "No." The answer came so quickly that several patrons turned toward him. Sebastian stood beneath the school crest in his dark formal coat, his expression carved into the cold composure he wore before Parliament. Beside him, Lady Cecily Vale rested one gloved hand on the lectern. The blue silk of her gown matched the ribbon wound around the school keys at her waist, Eleanor's keys. The accounts show that more than £2,000 intended for food, coal and clothing have disappeared, Cecily said. The entries bear her Grace's signature. They bear an imitation of it. A murmur moved through the hall. Eleanor did not look at Cecily. She kept her eyes on her husband. "Sebastian, you saw me close the legitimate accounts last Thursday. You know they are kept in the iron cabinet. The cabinet was empty when Lady Cecily inspected it. You gave her access without informing me. I gave access to someone willing to uncover the truth. The cruelty was not in his volume, but in his certainty. Only 3 nights earlier, Eleanor had shown him 2 conflicting invoices and asked him to delay any decision until she traced them. He had promised nothing, but he had listened. Now she understood that silence had already been his answer. Sebastian removed his signet ring. Before Eleanor could cross the distance between them, he pressed it into the hot wax beneath a prepared deed. The red seal hardened under his hand. With that single impression, he transferred control of Wycliffe School, the institution Eleanor had built from 4 rented rooms and 12 borrowed desks, to his mistress. Cecily smiled as though she had just been crowned. Eleanor heard a chair scrape in the rear of the hall. 20 pupils sat together in the last 3 rows. They came from different villages and different years of admission, yet each wore an identical grey ribbon pinned above the heart. A cold unease passed through her. The school used coloured ribbons only during evacuations. Red marked fever, blue marked flooding, white marked children awaiting family collection. Grey had never been assigned. A small girl named Martha touched hers and immediately lowered her hand when Cecily glanced back. "You are forbidden to enter these grounds after noon," Sebastian continued. "Until the royal inspection is complete, you will remain at the Dower House. If the missing funds are not recovered, the magistrate will be informed." "The inspector arrives in 3 days," Eleanor said. "Is that why this must be done today?" For the first time, Cecily's smile tightened. Sebastian descended from the platform. "Do not turn your disgrace into another accusation." Eleanor could have pleaded with him. Once, she might have reminded him how they had carried the first benches into this hall together, laughing when one became wedged in the doorway. She might have asked whether 8 years of labour deserved 1 hour of investigation. Instead, she removed the small brass whistle hanging from her chatelaine and placed it beside the forged account book. "The school is now under Lady Cecily's authority," she said. "So every child beneath this roof is now her responsibility and yours." Sebastian's jaw flexed. Eleanor walked out before either of them could dismiss her. At dawn the following morning, the bell above Wycliffe School rang 6 times the emergency signal. Eleanor was already awake at the Dower House. She reached the school on foot before the constable's carriage arrived and found the front courtyard crowded with servants. Cecily stood on the steps in a white dressing robe, performing distress for 3 benefactors. "The upper dormitory is empty," the housekeeper whispered when Eleanor approached. 20 beds, 20 children gone. Eleanor pushed past Cecily and climbed the stairs. The beds had been stripped. The windows were latched from within. 20 grey ribbons lay arranged across the floorboards in a perfect line. Sebastian entered behind her, carrying the forged account book. "Cecily found travel payments recorded here," he said. "Payments authorizing you to remove the children before the inspection." Eleanor opened her mouth, but boots thundered on the stairs. 2 constables appeared in the doorway. Sebastian did not order them to arrest her. He merely stepped aside. That hurt more. Eleanor crouched beside the ribbons. On the underside of each was a tiny pattern of stitched marks, the attendance code she had devised for pupils too young, frightened, or disabled to write their names. Cecily had noticed the ribbons but misunderstood the symbols. 19 patterns identified children enrolled at Wycliffe School. The 20th belonged to no pupil Eleanor had ever taught. She rose slowly, holding the unfamiliar ribbon between two fingers. Someone had not merely taken 20 children. Someone had brought one of them into the school first. Eleanor turned the 20th ribbon over beneath the dormitory window. The stitched code read, "Male, approximately 10 years old, admitted after nightfall, unable or unwilling to give a family name." She had created those marks herself, years earlier, after a terrified child arrived unable to speak. Only 3 people had ever been taught the entire system: Eleanor, the school's housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, and the former headmistress, Miss Hart, who had died the previous winter. Lady Cecily could not have invented this entry. "Your Grace," one constable said, "you must come with us." "On whose complaint?" "Mine," Cecily answered from the doorway. She had dressed hurriedly, but not carelessly. A black shawl now covered her nightclothes, and the school keys still hung from the blue ribbon at her waist. "I discovered the travel payments in your accounts," she continued. "The children disappeared less than 12 hours after you threatened to hold me responsible for them. I stated a fact. Responsibility followed the keys." Sebastian moved between them. "Enough. Eleanor, surrender the ribbon." She closed her fingers around it. "Why?" "Because it may be evidence." "It is evidence. That is why I will give it directly to the royal inspector." A faint change crossed Cecily's face, not fear, but calculation. Sebastian saw it too. For one suspended moment, Eleanor believed he might finally question her. Then, his gaze hardened. "You are already accused of concealing records. You will not remove another object from the premises." He reached for her hand. Eleanor stepped back. "No." The word silenced the room. Throughout their marriage, she had yielded rooms, invitations, money, and credit whenever his rank demanded it. She had explained away his absences and protected him from knowing how often the estate could not meet the school's expenses. But she would not surrender the first honest clue to the people who had destroyed her authority. Mrs. Finch appeared behind the constables, carrying a folded blanket. "Your Grace," the housekeeper said carefully, "the smallest child may be cold." Eleanor understood. She placed the ribbon inside the blanket as Mrs. Finch took it. Neither constable noticed. Cecily did. Yet before she could object, a groom rushed into the dormitory. "Your Grace, the magistrate's clerk has arrived. He says the North Road tollkeeper saw 2 covered wagons leave before midnight." Cecily turned toward Sebastian. "Then she had help." "Or the children were removed while you held every key," Eleanor replied. Sebastian ordered the constables to search the dower house rather than arrest her immediately. It was not trust. He wanted the missing money, and perhaps the children found where his accusation required them to be. Eleanor was escorted downstairs. As she crossed the classroom, she saw the school as it had been 8 years earlier: bare walls, cracked windows, and 12 girls sharing 3 primers. Before her marriage, she had worked as a governess in the household of an elderly aunt. She had learned to teach children who stammered, children who hid bruises, and children dismissed as incapable merely because no one had discovered how they learned. After becoming Duchess of Wycliffe, she had used the annual income secured to her by her marriage settlement to establish the school. It now educated 86 pupils, trained widows as teachers, and supplied 3 villages with winter meals. Sebastian had attended the opening. He had told her that Wycliffe needed something finer than another monument bearing his ancestors' names. Somewhere along the way, he had begun resenting how often the school's success was credited to her. Outside, Mrs. Finch caught up with Eleanor beside the constable's carriage. "The blanket is inside," she whispered. "But there is something else." She slipped a narrow kitchen tally into Eleanor's glove. Each morning, the cook marked the number of breakfasts served. Yesterday's tally showed 87 portions, one more than the number of enrolled pupils. "Who brought the extra child inside?" Eleanor asked. "I don't know." Lady Cecily dismissed the night porter on her first afternoon. "Where is he?" "No one has seen him since." The constable opened the carriage door. Eleanor climbed inside without resistance. She needed them to believe she was frightened and contained. More importantly, she needed Cecily to believe the ribbon remained with Mrs. Finch. At the dower house, the constables searched every room. They found no children, no travel trunks, and none of the missing funds. What they did find was a bundle of 20 railway vouchers beneath Eleanor's bed. Each bore her forged signature, The senior constable studied them grimly. These were purchased for tomorrow evening. Eleanor examined the destinations. 19 tickets led north toward the manufacturing towns. One ended at a private station near the coast. The discrepancy was deliberate. Someone wanted the authorities to believe she had sold 19 impoverished children into labor, but the 20th child was being sent elsewhere and was important enough to hide inside the larger crime. A stone struck the window. Eleanor looked out. Lucy, a deaf pupil of 13, stood beyond the garden wall. She raised both hands and used the signs Eleanor had taught her. Grey ribbons, night cellar, strange boy. Then Lucy made one final sign. He looks like the Duke. Eleanor stared through the window as Lucy repeated the sign. He looks like the Duke. The constable beside the bed was still examining the railway vouchers. Eleanor lowered her hands before he noticed her answering. Where is the boy now? Lucy pointed toward the village, crossed both wrists to indicate confinement, then traced the shape of a crown above her head. Eleanor understood only the first part. Your Grace, the senior constable said, do you deny purchasing these? I deny seeing them before today. All 20 bear your signature. Then compare the ink with the forged account book. His expression changed slightly. That book remains at the school, conveniently beyond your examination. The younger constable concealed a smile. His superior did not. You are confined to this house until the magistrate decides whether charges should be brought. Any attempt to leave will be treated as evidence of guilt. The men carried the vouchers away. Eleanor waited until their carriage disappeared before hurrying to the kitchen. Mrs. Finch had hidden the grey ribbon inside a flour bin, wrapped in waxed cloth. Eleanor laid it beside the kitchen tally and copied its stitched symbols onto a scrap of paper. The final mark was not part of her original code. It resembled a crown made with 3 uneven points. That was what Lucy had tried to show her. Someone had altered Eleanor's system to identify the strange boy. A soft knock sounded at the pantry door. Lucy slipped inside, breathless from running. Her dark braid had come loose, and mud covered the hem of her school dress. You should not have left the grounds, Eleanor signed. Lucy's hands moved quickly. Lady Cecily dismissed the teachers. She told the remaining children not to speak about last night. I hid in the laundry cart. Did you see the missing pupils leave? No. I saw them go into the cellar after supper. Miss Bell said there would be a medical examination. The strange boy was already there. Who is Miss Bell? New nurse. Lady Cecily brought her. Lucy reached into her pocket and produced a small pewter button. A crown and anchor were stamped upon its face. The strange boy tore this from his coat when Miss Bell pulled him downstairs. Eleanor recognized it as a button used on uniforms supplied to boys under royal protection. Such children were sometimes wards of naval officers, foreign diplomats, or members of the royal household whose identities could not safely be advertised. A royal ward hidden among poor pupils would explain the separate railway destination. It might also explain why the school had been targeted immediately before an inspection. Did the boy give you his name? Lucy shook her head. Then she spelled 3 letters against her palm. 2. A wheel grated across the gravel outside. Lucy looked toward the door in alarm. Eleanor concealed the button beneath her cuff and sent the girl through the servants' passage. Moments later, Sebastian entered the kitchen without knocking. He had never visited the Dower House before. I have postponed your arrest until the magistrate examines the signatures, he said. You will mistake that for mercy if it suits you. I mistake it for uncertainty. His mouth tightened. Eleanor had once known every change in his face. She had known when parliamentary debate exhausted him and when an old injury in his shoulder kept him awake. Now she saw only the man who had refused to look at evidence because believing Cecily was easier than admitting his wife might be right. Where were you last night? He asked. In this house, alone. No servant can confirm it. You removed my servants yesterday. He glanced toward the table. Eleanor had covered the copied code, but the edge of the kitchen tally remained visible. Sebastian reached for it. She placed her hand over the paper. No more records leave my possession. You have no authority to withhold evidence, and you had no obligation to sign Cecily's deed before investigating. Yet, we are both discovering what a signature can permit. For an instant, pain replaced anger in his eyes. Then it vanished. Cecily has appointed a new matron and nurse, he said. The school will reopen tomorrow. for the inspector. With 20 children missing, she believes they were taken to embarrass her. Of course she does. Sebastian leaned closer. If you know where they are, Eleanor, tell me now. Whatever exists between us, I will not allow children to be harmed. You already allowed the loyal night porter to be dismissed. You allowed an unknown nurse into the dormitory. You handed Cecily every key and silenced the only people who might question her. I did not authorize a new nurse. The admission escaped before he could restrain it. Eleanor watched the realization strike him. He recovered quickly, but not completely. Ask Cecily who Miss Bell is, she said. Then ask why a royal ward was brought into the school before 19 pupils disappeared with him. Sebastian's face became still. What royal ward? Eleanor showed him the pewter button, but did not surrender it. He recognized the emblem. My brother wore buttons like that at St. Aldwyn's, he murmured. Lord Nathaniel had died at sea 14 years earlier, unmarried and without acknowledged children. His death had made Sebastian heir to Wycliffe. Before Eleanor could question him, glass shattered in the pantry. A burning rag landed on the wooden floor. Sebastian stamped out the flames while Eleanor seized the bucket beside the stove. Together, they extinguished the fire before it reached the shelves. Outside, a rider vanished through the orchard. A second object had been thrown through the window, a stone wrapped in paper. Sebastian unfolded the message. Withdraw the accusation against the Duchess. Pay £5,000 before the royal inspector arrives. Otherwise, the 20 children will be found where her reputation cannot survive them. At the bottom stood a meeting place and deadline, the abandoned village chapel, midnight. Eleanor read it twice. The writer had made one mistake. The letter demanded that Sebastian withdraw an accusation no one outside the school and magistrate's office should yet have known existed. Someone within his newly appointed household had written the ransom note. Sebastian looked toward the road, his face pale with fury. Eleanor closed her hand around the royal button. Now, she said, you may begin asking Lady Cecily questions. But when they returned to Wycliffe School, Cecily was gone. So was Mrs. Finch and the 20th grey ribbon. Eleanor ran first to the empty hook beside the school entrance. Cecily's blue ribbon remained there, but every key had been removed. Sebastian ordered the servants to search the building and grounds. His voice filled the corridors with ducal authority, yet the authority itself had become useless. Cecily had dismissed the porter, replaced the matron, and rearranged the household before disappearing. No one remaining knew which locks had been changed or who had entered during the night. Eleanor climbed to the dormitory. Mrs. Finch's spectacles lay crushed beside the final bed. Near them, a streak of flour crossed the floorboards and ended at the wall. She marked her path, Eleanor said. Sebastian examined the panelling. There is no door here. There was once. Before the school became an academy, the building had served as a convalescent home. Eleanor had studied its old plans while supervising renovations. She pressed the carved center of a wooden flower, releasing a narrow service panel concealed behind the beds. Cold air rose from the passage. Sebastian called for lanterns, but Eleanor had already entered. The stairs descended behind the wall and opened into the old laundry cellar. Broken bowls and lengths of grey ribbon littered the floor. A bottle, marked as sleeping draught, stood beside a bucket of watered milk. Sebastian lifted it. Enough to sedate 20 children. Enough to kill the youngest if the dose were misjudged. A muffled blow sounded beyond the coal store. They found Mrs. Finch bound to a chair behind stacked baskets. Her face was bruised, and flour whitened one sleeve, but the missing ribbon remained clenched between her teeth. Eleanor cut the ropes herself. Where are the children? Taken through the delivery tunnel, Mrs. Finch gasped. 2 wagons waited beyond the kitchen wall. Miss Bell supervised everything. Did Cecily go with them? Sebastian asked. Mrs. Finch looked at Eleanor before answering. Lady Cecily ordered me to surrender the ribbon. When I refused, she said the Duchess would hang before anyone believed a servant. Sebastian flinched. Did you see the strange boy? Eleanor asked. Only briefly. Miss Bell kept his face covered, but he carried a silver whistle engraved with the name Thomas. Tom. The sound of carriage wheels entered the cellar from above. Sebastian hurried upstairs, believing Cecily had returned. Eleanor remained with Mrs. Finch. While helping her stand, she noticed reddish dust embedded in the woman's skirt. Not ordinary road mud, brick powder. The delivery tunnel had once connected the school to a riverside bakery, but but that route had collapsed years ago. If the abductors had reopened it, they could have moved 20 sedated children into wagons without passing through the gates. Eleanor followed the passage until loose bricks blocked the way. Fresh mortar covered their edges. She touched it. Still damp. Someone had sealed the tunnel after using it. The royal inspector arrived at 10 o'clock. Sir Alistair Crane stepped from his carriage, accompanied by a physician, 2 clerks, and a secretary from the Queen's Charitable Commission. Cecily emerged from the carriage behind them, composed and tearful. "I went to bring help," she announced. Eleanor knew at once what Cecily intended. She had not fled. She had reached the inspector first. Before Sebastian could speak, Cecily accused Eleanor of fabricating the abduction to conceal 8 years of theft. She displayed the forged account book and claimed that the dormitory passage had been known only to the school's founder. The Duchess alone possessed the knowledge required to remove the children unseen, Cecily concluded. Sir Alistair turned to Eleanor. "Is that true? I knew the passage existed." Lady Cecily knew it as well after taking possession of the architectural inventory yesterday. Cecily gave a wounded laugh. "There was no such inventory among the papers. Because you burned them. You have no proof of that." Smoke still blackened the courtyard grate, but the documents themselves were ash. Eleanor asked Sir Alistair to inspect the cellar before reaching any judgment. There she explained the sleeping draught, the flower trail, the reopened tunnel, and the fresh mortar. The royal physician examined the bottle and confirmed that the mixture could render a child unconscious. Sebastian stood beside the wall, watching Eleanor reveal what his household had failed to see. Sir Alistair ordered the bricks removed. Behind them lay a strip of grey fabric, a wagon wheel impression, and a silver teaspoon stamped with the crest of Wycliffe House. Cecily immediately seized upon it. The Duchess took that spoon from her husband's residence. She has planted everything. Several benefactors murmured agreement. Eleanor could defend herself by revealing Lucy as the witness who had seen the children enter the cellar, but doing so would expose the girl to Cecily and whoever controlled Miss Bell. "I will not name a child in an unsecured room," Eleanor said. "Not while the abductors remain free." Sir Alistair's expression cooled. "Then you withhold a witness from a royal inquiry?" "I protect her." The price of that choice came swiftly. He suspended Eleanor from all charitable work pending investigation and placed the school under Sebastian's direct authority. Cecily had stolen Eleanor's discovery, turned it into proof of guilt, and recovered the influence she had appeared to lose. But as the others returned upstairs, Mrs. Finch slipped something into Eleanor's palm. A fragment of blue thread had caught beneath the missing ribbon's stitches. It matched the ribbon from which Cecily wore the school keys. Eleanor carried it to Sebastian in the empty classroom. "Have your tailor compare these fibres," she said, placing both ribbons before him. "Do not take my word. Do not take Cecily's. Verify them. I... Sebastian looked from the grey ribbon to the blue one. For once, Eleanor offered him no plea and no excuse. Only a choice. Behind them, Cecily appeared in the doorway. "My love," she said softly, "the magistrate has brought the order authorizing Eleanor's arrest." Sebastian's hand hovered above the evidence. Eleanor watched his fingers close not around the ribbons, but around the magistrate's order. "Have you examined the fibres?" he asked. The magistrate glanced at Cecily. "Threads prove very little, Your Grace. We have forged accounts, railway vouchers found beneath the Duchess's bed, and a hidden passage known to her. And 20 missing children," Eleanor said. "Have you searched for them with the same enthusiasm you have shown in searching my rooms?" The magistrate reddened. Cecily approached Sebastian with deliberate gentleness. "If you delay, the Royal Commission may believe you are protecting your wife. Your seat in Parliament, your charitable appointments, even the school's license could be endangered." There it was. Not proof, but the threat he feared most. Sebastian's political allies had spent months negotiating his appointment to the Royal Education Council. A scandal attached to his wife might damage him. Publicly defending her could destroy him. And Eleanor saw the decision settle in his face before he made it. "You promised the tailor would examine the threads," she said. "I promised nothing. You have the opportunity now." Sir Alistair stood at the end of the corridor, waiting. So did the benefactors and Cecily's newly appointed servants. Sebastian could have ordered the comparison in front of every one of them. Instead, he dipped a pen into the ink. "Sebastian," Eleanor said, "if you sign that paper, Cecily will control the school, while every loyal witness is either dismissed, threatened, or missing. His pen touched the page. Do not make me responsible for your refusal to cooperate. You became responsible when you handed her the keys. A pulse moved in his cheek. Then he signed. The magistrate sanded the ink and passed the order to the constables. It authorized Eleanor's detention, the seizure of her personal correspondence, and the transfer of all remaining school records to Lady Cecily until the royal inquiry concluded. Cecily lowered her eyes to conceal her triumph. The constables took Eleanor by the arms. She did not resist. She looked only at Sebastian. You once told me this school was finer than any monument bearing your family's name, she said. Remember that when you discover what you have allowed to be built beneath it. As they led her through the assembly hall, Lucy stepped from behind a pillar. The girl's face crumpled when she saw the restraints. Eleanor shook her head once, warning her to remain silent. Cecily noticed the exchange. Search that pupil, she ordered. Lucy ran. A constable caught her near the chapel door. When he reached for her pocket, Eleanor tore free of the man holding her and placed herself between them. She is 13. She may be carrying stolen evidence, Cecily said. She is carrying nothing that belongs to you. The magistrate threatened Eleanor with an additional charge of obstruction. She refused to move until Sir Alistair intervened and declared that no child would be searched without the royal physician present. That delay gave Lucy enough time to slip the pewter button into a crack beneath the chapel rail. Eleanor saw it disappear. So did Miss Bell. The nurse stood near the side entrance in a plain brown dress, her expression empty. A moment later, she left the hall. Eleanor was taken to the village gaol. By afternoon, Cecily used Sebastian's signed order to dismiss Mrs. Finch and seize every attendance, book, admission letter, medical record, and family address held by the school. Crates of documents were loaded into a covered wagon under Miss Bell's supervision. Sebastian had not merely arrested the woman who understood those records. He had given the suspected conspirators legal authority to remove them. Inside her cell, Eleanor stopped thinking about saving her marriage. The boundary had finally become a wall. She would protect the children, expose the scheme, and recover the school if the law allowed it. Whether Sebastian stood beside her or beneath the consequences of his own signature no longer mattered. Near dusk, the younger constable brought her bread and a cup of water. My sister attended your school, he said quietly. She reads letters for our mother now, because of you. Eleanor recognized him then. Daniel Price, the miller's son. He had waited outside the classroom every winter afternoon, while his sister learned. Will you carry a message to Lucy? If the magistrate learns, the children may be moved tomorrow night. By then, fear of the magistrate will be the least of your regrets. Daniel looked toward the corridor, then nodded. Eleanor instructed Lucy to retrieve the pewter button and take it to Reverend Hale, whose parish register contained the names of every child legally admitted to Wycliffe School. She also asked the clergyman to determine which royal institution used the crown and anchor emblem. An hour later, Daniel returned pale and empty-handed. Lucy reached the chapel, he said. The button was gone. And did Miss Bell take it? No one knows, but Reverend Hale sent this. He passed Eleanor a page torn from a parish burial register. 14 years earlier, the clergyman had buried a naval cadet named Thomas Vale after a fire at St. Aldwyn's School. Eleanor read the surname again. Val, Cecily's family name. Beside the burial entry appeared a note in Reverend Hale's careful script. Body never formally identified. A bell began ringing outside, not from the church, but from Wycliffe School. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it continued until it had sounded 20 times. Daniel rushed to the barred window. Orange light rose above the rooftops. The school is burning. Eleanor gripped the iron bars as flames consumed the building that had sheltered her pupils, her records, and 8 years of work. Then a rider galloped into the jail yard, shouting that cries had been heard from inside. Cecily had announced that the missing children were trapped in the fire, and that Duchess Eleanor had ordered the school burned to destroy them. The children are not inside that school, Eleanor said. Daniel turned from the barred window. How can you know? Because Cecily needs them alive until the royal inspection. Another bell stroke rolled across the village. The fire was not intended to kill 20 children. It was meant to destroy the records that proved who they were and to force every witness to accept Cecily's account before the truth could be examined. Eleanor seized the water cup and hurled it against the cell door. "Constable." The senior constable appeared with the jail keeper. Smoke already darkened the sky behind them. "If you release me, I can show you how to stop the fire from reaching the girl's sleeping wing. You are accused of ordering it. Then, keep me chained. But if you wait for the magistrate, the roof will collapse before his carriage reaches the square." Daniel supported her. His superior hesitated until a second messenger arrived, reporting that 6 servants and several younger pupils were still trapped in the east classrooms. The keeper unlocked the cell. They reached the school as flames burst through the upper windows. Villagers formed a line from the pump, passing buckets toward a building that seemed to swallow water without weakening. Sebastian stood in the courtyard with blood running from a cut above his eye. He had tried to enter through the main doors, but a burning beam had fallen across the hall. "Eleanor?" Surprise gave way to anger when he saw her chains. "She should not be here," he told the constable. "Neither should the children still inside," Eleanor replied. Cecily was nowhere in sight. Eleanor studied the smoke. The flames were brightest near the archive room, yet the east wing was filling faster than the rest of the building. That meant the ventilation grills beneath the floors had been opened. The old heating passages were carrying smoke directly toward the occupied classrooms. Cecily had learned about the hidden tunnel from the architectural inventory. She had learned about the ventilation system as well. "Close the iron draft gate beneath the laundry stairs," Eleanor ordered. "Then break the east classroom windows from outside." Sebastian called for men to obey her. She turned on him. "They are not waiting for your title. Show them where to go." He stared at her for half a second, then seized an axe and led 4 tenants toward the laundry entrance. Eleanor ran to the chapel side with Daniel. The door had been locked from within, but she knew the old classrooms shared a narrow cupboard used to pass books between rooms. Daniel broke the outer panel. One by one, Eleanor pulled coughing children through the opening. The final pupil was too frightened to move. Eleanor crawled inside, despite the chain between her wrists. Smoke stung her eyes. She found the little boy beneath a desk and wrapped her body around his as part of the ceiling fell. Sebastian appeared through the smoke. He lifted the burning timber from Eleanor's path, scorching both hands through his gloves. Together they carried the boy into the courtyard. The villagers cheered when the child began to breathe. Cecily arrived at that exact moment in Sir Alistair's carriage. She surveyed the rescued pupils, Sebastian's burned hands, and Eleanor kneeling in the mud. Her expression hardened for only an instant. Then she began to weep. "I feared I was too late. The Duchess's accomplice confessed before dying." A dead man lay in the carriage. Eleanor recognized the school's dismissed night porter. Cecily produced a letter allegedly found in his coat. It claimed Eleanor had paid him to remove the children, place the railway vouchers in her room, and burn the archive if an investigation began. Sir Alistair read it before the gathered villagers. Sebastian looked at Eleanor. 6 hours earlier, his belief might still have mattered to her. Now she turned away and asked the royal physician to examine the dead porter's hands. "There is no soot beneath his fingernails," she said. "If he started this fire and struggled to escape it, there should be." Cecily's tears stopped. The physician checked. "There is none." "And his lips are blue," Eleanor continued. "He was dead before the school burned." Sir Alistair ordered the body secured for examination. For the first time, the crowd looked at Cecily with suspicion. Then a clerk emerged from the ruined archive carrying an iron dispatch box. The flames had blackened its lid, but left the contents intact. Inside were letters bearing Sebastian's seal. They appeared to authorize the transfer of school funds into speculative investments controlled by Lady Cecily's family. Sebastian read the first page and went white. "I signed blank administrative warrants," he admitted. Cecily said they were needed to purchase winter coal. Because he had transferred authority to her, the transactions were legally recorded as actions of his household. The Royal Commission immediately suspended him from the Education Council. His political allies withdrew their support before the embers cooled. The loss was not punishment delivered by chance. His own seal had opened the accounts. His own signature had removed the woman who would have questioned them. Cecily was placed under temporary supervision, but Sir Alistair could not arrest her. The forged letter, the account book, and Sebastian's warrants still created a case against Eleanor as well. At midnight, The royal physician completed his examination of the dead porter. He was given the same sleeping draught found in the cellar, he reported, but in a fatal quantity. Mrs. Finch then arrived with worse news. A boy from the toll house had seen 2 wagons travelling toward Blackmere Quarry, an abandoned limestone pit 12 miles north. Eleanor knew the place. Beneath it ran flooded extraction tunnels connected to an underground river. Heavy rain was expected before dawn. Once the water rose, no wagon could leave. Sir Alistair gave them until sunrise to find the children. After that, he would issue warrants for Eleanor, Cecily, and Sebastian alike. Eleanor asked for a horse. Sebastian stepped forward. "I'm coming with you." "No," she said. "You will remain here and surrender every sealed warrant, private letter, and account Cecily ever asked you to sign. The children may need more men. They need someone who understands why they were selected." She took the grey ribbon and the kitchen tally from Mrs. Finch. 19 poor children, 1 unidentified boy, 1 false railway route, 1 royal emblem linked to a body never formally identified. The pattern finally began to form. The 19 were not chosen to be sold, Eleanor said. They were chosen because their records could be exchanged. A distant rumble of thunder shook the broken windows. "And if I am right, the 20th child will be given a dead boy's name before sunrise." Eleanor left Wycliffe School on Mrs. Finch's grey mare, with Daniel riding beside her. She did not go directly to Blackmere Quarry. If Cecily's people watched the northern road, a rescue party would warn them to move the children. Eleanor instead turned east toward Reverend Hale's parish house, the one place beyond Sebastian's authority where the school's original admission records might still survive. The clergyman opened the door before she knocked. "I heard about the fire," he said. "Come inside." His study became Eleanor's first place of command since losing the school. Mrs. Finch arrived minutes later with Lucy concealed beneath a servant's cloak. Daniel guarded the lane while Reverend Hale spread 3 registers across his desk. Eleanor placed the kitchen tally, the grey ribbon, and her copy of the stitched code beside them. "Why would anyone exchange the records of 19 poor children?" the Reverend asked. "Because children without influential families can disappear on paper before anyone with power notices." Eleanor compared the missing pupils' admission entries. 14 were orphans. 3 had mothers employed in distant factories. 2 had fathers serving abroad. None had relatives likely to attend the royal inspection. They had been selected because their identities were easy to steal. Lucy pointed to the list and signed that Miss Bell had measured each child's height, teeth, hair, and scars. "Descriptions for replacement records," Eleanor said. "Cecily intends to report that the children inspected tomorrow are the same pupils enrolled here, but she will present different children under their names." Reverend Hale frowned. "Why replace 19? To conceal the 20th. She showed him the crown and anchor button. The Reverend retrieved a locked packet sent years earlier by a chaplain from St. Aldwyn's Naval Academy. Its broken wax bore the same emblem. Inside was a copy of the report describing the fire that had supposedly killed Thomas Vale. Thomas had been 11 years old. He possessed a crescent-shaped scar behind his left ear. No body had been formally identified because the remains were too badly burned. Eleanor thought of Lucy's description of the strange boy. "Did you see a scar?" she signed. Lucy nodded and touched the skin behind her left ear. The room fell silent. Thomas Vale had not died 14 years ago. He had survived, and the child hidden at Wycliffe School bore the same identifying mark. "That boy cannot be Thomas," Daniel said. "He is only 10 now." "No," Eleanor replied. "But he may be Thomas's son." Reverend Hale opened a second register. 2 weeks before the St. Aldwyn's fire, Sebastian's younger brother Nathaniel had visited the parish with Thomas Vale. Nathaniel had signed as witness to a private declaration, but the declaration itself had been removed. Cecily's brother had known the late Lord Nathaniel. If Thomas possessed proof that Nathaniel had secretly married before his death, then Thomas's son might challenge Sebastian's inheritance, not necessarily the ducal title, but private lands, trusts, an income Sebastian had controlled for 14 years. Cecily was not helping Sebastian protect Wycliffe. She was manufacturing a false succession claim she could control. By replacing 19 vulnerable pupils and altering their records, she could create a convincing history for the 20th boy. After the royal inspection authenticated the false registers, She could produce him as Nathaniel's alleged son, or conceal the real child beneath another identity until the evidence suited her. Hoofbeats sounded outside. Sebastian entered the study carrying a scorched wooden box. His palms were bandaged, and exhaustion had stripped the arrogance from his face. "You told me to surrender everything Cecily asked me to sign," he said. "I found this behind the panel in her room." Inside lay 20 new admission certificates, each already marked with the Royal Commission's preliminary stamp. Eleanor examined them without thanking him. 19 contained the stolen names of the missing pupils. The 20th identified Thomas Nathaniel Wycliffe as the legitimate grandson of Lord Nathaniel. The certificate was false, but once paired with a substituted child, altered school records, and a royal inspection, it could become powerful enough to freeze Sebastian's private estates during an inheritance inquiry. Sebastian sank into a chair. "She used my warrants to pay for this." "Yes, I thought you cared more for the school than for our marriage. I cared for children who required both food and teaching. You resented every hour that did not belong to you." He looked at the registers. "How much of the school's expense did you pay from your settlement?" "Nearly half. I was told the estate carried it." "By Cecily?" His silence answered. Remorse entered his face, but Eleanor felt no urge to comfort him. "You may help," she said, "on 3 conditions. You obey my instructions, you claim no authority over the evidence, and when this ends, you publicly name what you chose to do, not merely what Cecily deceived you into doing." Sebastian bowed his head. "Agreed." Reverend Hale sealed the false certificates inside the scorched box. He recorded the time, listed everyone present, and signed across the wrapping. Daniel and Lucy added their marks as witnesses, establishing a chain of custody that Cecily could not easily dismiss. They prepared to send the box under guard to Sir Alistair. Then the parish windows exploded inward. Masked men entered through the study and kitchen at once. Daniel was struck down. Sebastian fought one attacker despite his burned hands, while Eleanor dragged Lucy behind the heavy desk. Reverend Hale reached for the bell rope, but Miss Bell stepped from the passage and pressed a pistol against his chest. "Give me the certificates," she said. No one moved. Miss Bell smiled and aimed instead at Lucy. Eleanor surrendered the sealed box. The attackers withdrew with it, locking the parish doors from outside. By the time Sebastian broke a window and reached the lane, the riders had disappeared toward Blackmere. The fragile proof was gone, but on the floor beneath the shattered glass lay a fragment of wax from the seal. Lucy picked it up, examined the impression, and urgently pulled Eleanor's sleeve. The girl pointed to one tiny defect in Sebastian's ducal crest. The lion's tail curved left instead of right. Eleanor had seen that reversed seal before. It appeared on every railway voucher found beneath her bed. Cecily's forgeries had not been made with a copied stamp. They had been produced from a wax impression taken directly from the signet Sebastian still wore on his hand. Eleanor took Sebastian's injured hand and turned the signet toward the lamplight. The lion's tail curved correctly on the ring, but when the seal was pressed into soft wax and then copied into a second mold, the image would reverse. Cecily had not stolen the signet itself. She had obtained one of Sebastian's genuine impressions and used it to manufacture a duplicate. "How many blank warrants did you seal for her?" Eleanor asked. 7, perhaps 8. "You do not know?" Shame tightened his face. "I trusted her." "No, you chose not to verify her requests because they surling your wanted." Before Sebastian could answer, carriage wheels stopped outside the parish house. The magistrate entered with 6 constables and Sir Alistair's secretary. Cecily followed them, no longer pretending distress. She carried the scorched box Miss Bell had just stolen. "We found this in the Duchess's carriage," she said. Eleanor almost admired the speed of the attack. The box's wrapping had been replaced. Reverend Hale's custody record was gone. Inside lay the false admission certificates, several letters suggesting Eleanor had paid strangers to impersonate missing pupils, and a draft petition claiming Thomas Nathaniel Wycliffe as Sebastian's lawful heir. Cecily had transformed the proof of her scheme into evidence that Eleanor had invented it. "She intends to seize the Wycliffe estates," Cecily told the magistrate. "When her theft was discovered, she created a rival heir to punish her husband." The explanation was simple, emotional, and plausible. That made it dangerous. Sir Alistair's secretary announced that the royal inspector had received 19 children at a nearby charitable residence. Each carried documents identifying them as Wycliffe pupils. None remembered being abducted. "They are substitutes," Eleanor said. "Or they are the very children you claimed had vanished," Cecily replied. The sleeping draft would have left the real pupils confused. The newly presented children had likely been coached, fed, and dressed in school uniforms. Without the original records, proving the exchange before sunrise appeared impossible. The magistrate ordered Eleanor arrested for abduction, fraud, destruction of charitable property, and conspiracy against the Wycliffe succession. He also ordered Lucy detained as a material witness. "No," Eleanor said. She moved in front of the girl as the constables approached. Sebastian drew himself upright. "The child will not be taken. You no longer direct this inquiry," the magistrate replied. "Your own financial conduct is under examination." The space. "Then examine all of it." Sebastian removed his signet ring and placed it on the desk. Before the magistrate, the constables, Reverend Hale, and Sir Alister's secretary, he admitted that he had sealed blank warrants for Cecily. He acknowledged transferring the school without examining its genuine accounts. He confessed that Eleanor had warned him about conflicting invoices and that he had refused her request for time because he feared losing a political appointment. Then he named the truth that would destroy what remained of his public standing. "I knew Lady Cecily was attempting to replace my wife in more than the school," he said. "I permitted the intimacy because her family's influence could advance me. Whatever fraud she committed afterward was enabled by authority. I willingly gave her." Cecily's face sharpened. "Take care, Sebastian. I should have taken care before I signed." His confession did not prove Eleanor innocent, but it destroyed Cecily's claim that she had acted with unquestioned ducal approval. Sir Alister's secretary immediately recorded every word. Sebastian's parliamentary allies would abandon him. His council appointment was already gone, and a formal inquiry into his household finances was now unavoidable. He had told the costly truth without asking Eleanor to forgive him. The magistrate nevertheless ordered her taken into custody. Lucy would remain with Reverend Hale, but only until the royal inspection convened at 8 in the morning. As the constables escorted Eleanor outside, Cecily moved close enough to whisper, "By noon, 19 replacements will possess royal certification. The real children will be beyond anyone's reach." Eleanor looked at her. Cecily had revealed too much. Not where the children were, but what had to happen before they could be disposed of. The substitutes required royal certification first. Therefore, Cecily needed the inspector to compare them with records she believed she controlled. In the jail, Eleanor reconstructed every detail: the grey ribbons, the physical descriptions, the forged certificates, the reversed seal, the 20 railway vouchers, 19 routes north and 1 toward the coast. Then she remembered the breakfast tally. 87 portions had been served, one more than the official number of pupils, yet 20 children had later vanished. If the strange boy had been added that night, the total should have been 87. That was correct. But the grey ribbons had already marked 20 children during the benefactors' meeting, before the extra breakfast was served. The 20th ribbon had not originally belonged to the strange boy. Someone had removed it from another pupil and reassigned its code after Tom arrived. Why? Because Cecily needed everyone to assume the group had always contained 20 selected children. In truth, only 19 Wycliffe pupils had been targeted. The 20th missing child was not a pupil, and one genuine student who wore grey at the meeting had never been taken at all. That child had seen the exchange. Eleanor remembered Martha touching her ribbon and shrinking beneath Cecily's gaze. Martha was not among the names on the railway vouchers. She had disappeared from the dormitory list only because her attendance page had been altered. She might still be inside the school or wherever Cecily had hidden the surviving records. At dawn, Daniel arrived outside the cell with soot on his coat. "The magistrate won't release you," he said. "He does not need to. Take a message to Sir Alister. Tell him the inspection must proceed exactly as Cecily planned." Daniel stared at her. "You want him to certify the replacements?" "I want Cecily to identify them publicly." Eleanor handed him a list of questions written on the back of the burial entry. "Tell Sir Alister not to ask the children their names. Ask Lady Cecily to name each one herself." "And then?" Eleanor looked toward the paling sky. Then we make her prove knowledge that only the kidnapper could possess. At 8 o'clock, the royal inspection began inside the scorched assembly hall of Wycliffe School. Rain leaked through the damaged roof. The blackened crest still hung above the lectern where Sebastian had accused his wife 3 days earlier. Sir Alistair sat beside the magistrate and the royal physician. Reverend Hale guarded Lucy near the chapel door. Daniel stood with Mrs. Finch among the dismissed servants. Sebastian occupied no place of honour. He waited alone beneath the gallery, his signet surrendered, and both hands wrapped in linen. 19 children in clean school uniforms filled the front row. Cecily stood behind them. These pupils were found unharmed at St. Anne's charitable residence, she announced. Their confusion arose from the Duchess's attempt to frighten them into supporting a false accusation. Sir Alistair requested Eleanor's presence. The magistrate objected, but Daniel had delivered her message together with the burial page. 2 constables brought Eleanor from the jail, in restraints. Cecily smiled when she saw the chains. Eleanor did not look at her. She studied the children. They were the correct approximate ages. Their hair had been cut to match descriptions in the stolen records. Several wore shoes taken from the empty dormitory. One girl had a painted mark on her wrist, where an admission record mentioned a scar. The deception had been prepared carefully. Sir Alistair addressed Cecily. As acting patroness, you will identify each pupil for the commission. End. Co. As. End. Cecily began without hesitation. Anne Cooper, Mary Shaw, Rebecca Flint. A clerk recorded every name. Eleanor remained silent until Cecily had identified all 19 children. Then she asked permission to question them. The Duchess has no authority here, Cecily said. She founded the institution whose pupils I am inspecting, Sir Alistair replied. I will hear her. Eleanor approached the first child. What song did Miss Hart teach every new pupil? The girl looked toward Cecily. I do not remember. Eleanor moved to the next. Which classroom floods beneath the western window? I do not know. A third could not identify Mrs. Finch. A fourth claimed the school served meat on Fridays, although it never had. None understood Lucy's signs. None recognized the brass whistle Eleanor had placed on the lectern during her dismissal. Cecily interrupted. They were drugged and abducted. Their memories are unreliable. Then yours must guide us, Eleanor said. She requested the forged attendance ledger. Cecily produced it from a locked case. 20 names appeared beside detailed descriptions, height, colouring, scars, and dental marks. Eleanor touched the final entry. Who is this child? Thomas Nathaniel Wycliffe. A stir passed through the room. And when was he admitted? 3 weeks ago. Under whose authority? Yours. Eleanor faced Sir Alistair. My system records admission through stitched marks when a child cannot sign. The grey ribbon associated with Thomas states that he entered after nightfall and could not provide a family name. Lady Cecily claims he was admitted 3 weeks ago under a complete name. Cecily's expression remained composed. The Duchess altered the ribbon, then explained the blue thread trapped beneath its stitches. Eleanor placed the ribbon on the evidence table. Mrs. Finch testified how it had remained in her possession until Cecily's men seized it, and Lucy identified the original grey markings. Sir Alistair ordered a tailor to compare the fibre with Cecily's key ribbon. The tailor had been waiting outside under Daniel's protection. Through a magnifying lens, he examined the weave, dye, and unusual silver filament running through both samples. They came from the same length of ribbon, he concluded. Cecily laughed softly. I distributed grey markers to the children. A loose thread proves only that I handled one. You said the Duchess invented and altered the ribbon, Sir Alistair replied. I was mistaken. Eleanor allowed the contradiction to settle. She then presented the railway vouchers. The reverse ducal seal matched the counterfeit impression on the false admission certificates, while Sebastian's genuine signet produced the opposite image. Sebastian stepped forward only to authenticate his own failure. I sealed blank warrants for Lady Cecily, he said. I never sealed these vouchers, but my negligence gave her the impression from which the duplicate was made. He did not interpret the evidence for Eleanor. He did not ask the room to pity him. Cecily attacked again, even if certain papers were copied without permission. None of this proves I took the children. The Duchess knew the tunnels. Her servant possessed the ribbon. Her former pupil carried the button. I. And you knew The children's physical descriptions, Eleanor said. As patroness, I read their records. The records you claimed had burned? Cecily hesitated. Miss Bell appeared at the rear doors before she could answer. 2 armed men held Martha between them, a knife pressed against the girl's throat. Cecily's control finally fractured. Bring me the ribbon and the burial register, she ordered, or this child dies. The assembly erupted. Sebastian moved forward, but Eleanor stopped him with one look. A frightened attack would get Martha killed. Eleanor placed the ribbon and Reverend Hale's register on the floor, then stepped away. You kept Martha because she saw Tom brought into the cellar, Eleanor said. Cecily said nothing. You could not replace her until you knew whether she had spoken. So you erased her from the missing list and transferred her grey ribbon to him. Miss Bell tightened her hold on the child. Eleanor turned toward the 19 substitutes. These children were selected by height and colouring, but Lady Cecily did not merely know the genuine pupils' names. Before the abduction became public, she knew which 19 could vanish without relatives reaching the inspection. That is speculation, Cecily snapped. Then let us use something no forged account, altered register, or coached child can supply. Eleanor asked the royal physician to bring forward the sealed medical packets collected when each genuine pupil entered the school. Cecily had burned the archive, but she had overlooked the duplicates Eleanor sent annually to the village infirmary. The physician placed 19 unopened packets on the table. Each contained a private childhood detail never written in the attendance book. A healed fracture, a birthmark beneath clothing, an allergy, or a previous illness. Cecily's face lost its colour. Eleanor selected the packet, bearing the first stolen name, and handed it to Sir Alistair. Lady Cecily has sworn that the girl before us is Anne Cooper, she said. Let the physician examine her against the records Cecily never knew existed. Sir Alistair broke the infirmary seal. Sir Alistair broke the infirmary seal. The royal physician read the private entry, then examined the girl Cecily had identified as Anne Cooper. The real Anne fractured her left collarbone at 6 years of age, he said. The bone healed unevenly. This child has never suffered such an injury. The assembly hall fell silent. He opened the second packet. The real Mary Shaw had a birthmark beneath her right shoulder. The substitute did not. The third, genuine pupil, was severely allergic to lavender. Cecily's replacement wore a lavender sachet around her neck without discomfort. One examination followed another. Every comparison failed. The 19 children before the commission were not Wycliffe pupils. Cecily stepped backward. You cannot prove I arranged the exchange. Martha can, Eleanor said. The child was still held at knife point, but Miss Bell had begun watching the doors rather than her prisoner. Daniel quietly moved behind the former nurse, while Sebastian drew her attention from the opposite side. Martha saw Tom brought through the cellar, Eleanor continued. She saw you replace her grey ribbon with another bearing his description. You kept her alive because you did not know what she had told Lucy. Cecily's eyes flicked toward Martha. That moment was enough. Martha stamped on Miss Bell's foot and dropped. Daniel seized the woman's wrist. Sebastian struck the knife from her hand despite his burned palms, and the constables overpowered both armed men. Mrs. Finch gathered Martha into her arms. Sir Alistair ordered Cecily arrested. She laughed once, sharply. For what? Managing a school badly? For abduction, forgery, fraud, conspiracy, attempted extortion, destruction of evidence, and whatever part you played in the porter's death, Eleanor said. But there is still one child missing from this room. The 20th railway voucher led to a private coastal station. Its destination stood near an estate owned by Cecily's uncle, who had been guardian to her brother Thomas after the St. Aldwyn's fire. Sir Alistair dispatched constables immediately. Others rode toward Blackmere Quarry, where the genuine pupils were found inside a dry upper chamber, minutes before floodwater filled the lower tunnels. They were frightened and weak from the sleeping draught, but all 19 were alive. Tom was recovered at the coast with Thomas Vale himself. The truth emerged through letters hidden in the elder Thomas's travelling case. He had survived the academy fire and lived abroad under another name. Years earlier, Cecily discovered that her brother had once carried private correspondence for Lord Nathaniel. She invented a marriage between them and intended to present Tom as Nathaniel's legitimate son. The claim could not grant the boy Sebastian's ducal title. but it could freeze several private Wycliffe trusts and estates during a prolonged inheritance inquiry. Cecily planned to control those assets as Tom's supposed aunt and guardian. The 19 abducted pupils supplied camouflage. Their identities were to be given to children recruited from distant institutions, allowing the royal inspection to authenticate altered records. Once the substitutions appeared legitimate, Tom's manufactured school history would seem equally trustworthy. Eleanor's accusation for theft served two purposes. It removed the only person capable of recognizing the false pupils, and it provided someone to blame when the genuine children were eventually declared dead in an accident at the quarry. Miss Bell had drugged the dismissed porter when he refused to cooperate. The fatal dose silenced him, and the forged confession placed the murder, fire, and abduction at Eleanor's feet. Cecily's mistake was believing that poor children possessed no history beyond the records she could burn. Eleanor had given each of them another place in which to be remembered. Cecily and Miss Bell were committed for trial. Her uncle was arrested at the coast, while Thomas Vale faced charges for conspiracy and false claims against the Wycliffe estates. The substitute children were placed under the Commission's protection. Eleanor insisted they be treated as exploited victims rather than accomplices. Sebastian's consequences did not end with Cecily's arrest. Before the Commission, the teachers, the villagers, and the rescued pupils, he confessed that he had ignored contradictory evidence, signed Eleanor's arrest order, surrendered the school to his mistress, and chosen political ambition over his wife's honor. "I was deceived," he said, "because deception offered me what I wanted. That does not make me innocent. It makes my choice easier to name." He resigned his parliamentary education appointment and surrendered control of every charitable trust bearing the Wycliffe name. He paid restitution from his unentailed property to rebuild the school, restore the stolen funds, compensate the dismissed servants, and establish independent support for every abducted child. The original marriage settlement was enforced through trustees. Eleanor regained her income, secured a separate residence, and became the school's permanent governor beyond Sebastian's authority. Only after those arrangements were signed did he ask to speak with her privately. They stood in the restored assembly hall 3 months later. New desks filled the room. Above them hung the repaired school crest, but Eleanor's brass nameplate had not yet returned to the door. "I cannot ask you to forget what I did," Sebastian said. "No. I cannot ask you to trust that remorse has changed me. No." His eyes lowered. "Is there anything I may ask? That you continue repairing the harm when no one is present to praise you?" He accepted the answer without reaching for her. Their marriage remained legally intact, but Eleanor chose a separate life. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would not restore his authority over her, nor would it erase the moment he had stepped aside and allowed constables to take her. Outside, the school bell rang. 86 pupils gathered in the courtyard, including the 19 who had returned from Blackmere. Martha stood beside Lucy. Neither wore a grey ribbon. Sir Alistair handed Eleanor a new set of school keys. Sebastian watched from beyond the gate, occupying no platform and claiming no place beside her. Eleanor crossed the assembly hall to the same classroom door where he had once removed her name. With her own hands, she fastened the brass plate back into the wood. Then she unlocked the door. The children entered first.